In our house, I've been building stuff. Now, I say I've been building stuff, and I want you to understand, I have tools. I'm even allowed to use power tools now. That restriction was taken off. There was a time when I went to a fellow's house. We were trying to build a trailer to go on a youth trip. He said, here, cut this piece of wood. He handed me a saw and a piece of wood, and I looked at it, and he went, what? And I started trying to use it. He took it away from me. He goes, you are never allowed to use power tools again. That was before I met my wife, and she went to do wedding registry at Craftsman at Sears. But now we have tools. Now we build things. We have a single rooster that we used to have lots of chickens. But then some dogs came through our yard. Now we have a single rooster. But in the process of the dogs coming through my yard, I started building out a chicken coop. It's a pretty good-sized chicken coop. It's made for between 8 and 10 chickens. So now, the rooster's got the bachelor pad of the year. It's gigantic. He's got a mansion for himself. But you have to build it. So I was in there building this week, and there's two boards nobody ever wants to talk about. See, my wife got me these really fancy sawhorses for Christmas, and on the ends they have these little slots where you drop in a 2x4 or a 2x6, and you can make a table out of it, or you can make cuts on it, or whatever you got to do. And it's really fancy, really nice. And I started realizing those two boards that I put in there are the two boards nobody ever wants to talk about. Now, those of you that have ever done any kind of woodworking, construction, or anything else, you're going, I know what he's talking about. They're the sacrificial boards. Because whenever you make a cut and you forget to adjust the depth on your saw, you go across that board and you leave a big mar in that board. Anybody else got these boards in their house? I've had several because I forget sometimes and I go way too deep, or I grab them to use them for something else because I just don't quite have enough lumber. And so then my sacrificial boards become my scabber boards. But the sacrificial boards, I put them there, and as I was cutting this past week, I looked at them and I just kept going across, and I kept thinking, man, if it weren't for these boards, I wouldn't hardly be able to do anything. I needed them. I needed those boards to sacrifice themselves so that I could bring about something new and solid and useful in my house. If that sacrificial board hadn't been there sacrificing itself, I would have never gotten anything done, and I wouldn't have grown any as a carpenter. Not saying I grew a lot as a carpenter, I'm just saying I grew a little. Let's just say it got built. How's that? Don't come look, it ain't pretty. But it's done. I want you to understand that without sacrifice, it is hard to grow. And in the story in John 11 we're going to be looking at today, I'm going to throw one verse on the screen for you today. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. How do we sacrifice to make that a true verse in our life? The first part of John 11 is you guys have all watched TV shows. You know the recap they do at the beginning? They always tell you everything that's happened kind of around this or what's happening in this episode, and they're about to put it all together for you. The first little bit of John 11 is a recap. We're going to start in 1 and we'll go down to about 7. It says, now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. You see, 11, 1 through 7 is kind of a recap of what's going on. It's kind of giving us the prologue to the story. It's telling us what's the main players in the story, if you will. And what I'm going to suggest to you is Jesus chose to stay there 2 more days after he heard Lazarus was sick. Now, I want you to know something. If I love somebody and somebody tells me that that person is sick, like deathly sick, that they took the time to come hunt me down and find me, I don't go, well, it's cool, I'll wait a couple days before I go see him. When my grandma was about to die and they said everybody needs to get to the hospital, I didn't go, you know what, I think she'll make it another 48 hours, I'm just going to let it ride. I got in my car, I drove there, I went and I saw my grandma before she died. what is Jesus doing? Because if we keep looking down, this problem seems to exacerbate itself as we go down through. In 11, it says, the disciples look at him and go, but Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back. Jesus is kind of seeming a little crazy here too, because he's going back to Judea. You got to remember, the Jews, which are the bad guys now, the Jews want to kill Jesus. Jesus said, okay, it's time to go to Judea to see Lazarus. And his friends are like, are you crazy? Brother, we love you, but they tried to kill you last time. Why do you want to go back there? Jesus' reputation is taking a little bit of a hit here. If we look down into 36 through 37, it kind of comes in a little bit. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man have kept this man from dying? After Jesus gets there, everybody goes, well, Jesus made it. Why didn't he get here earlier? Did he really love this guy? Because if he could open a blind man's eyes, why did he take so long to get here? The guy died. He could have kept him from dying. I want you to understand something. Jesus could have gotten there earlier. Jesus could have healed him from being sick. Jesus could have done anything Jesus wanted to do. He's God. Okay? Don't miss that point in the whole situation. We talk about Jesus in his man form a lot, but remember, Jesus is still God. He does what he wants to do as long as it is within his Father's will. It seems odd to me. Also, it seems odd to me that he allows his reputation to be hit in so many different ways in this story. You have so many places that people look at him and go, you're crazy for going back there. You waited 2 whole days. You didn't make it in time to save him. He was your friend. You said you loved him. The people saw him with Mary and Martha, and they go, he must have really loved them. He really did love them, but why didn't he come save Lazarus? Jesus had to sacrifice his reputation to glorify God. Do you understand that? People thought he was crazy. People thought he didn't care about Lazarus. People thought he was being mean to the sisters. He didn't go and jump up immediately, run to Judea, and fix Lazarus. I'm going to tell you something. If you were dying, any of you, anybody, if you're dying and someone walks up to me and says, you're the only one that can save him or her, how soon do you want me there? Pretty soon, don't you? If you're not nodding your head yes, you must have a death wish. I'm just saying, think about this, okay? If I'm the only person that can save you and you're laying on your deathbed and somebody goes, he can save you, you're going to go get him here. But then the message comes back and they say the only guy that can save you, he's kind of chilling for a couple days. What's your answer going to be? Huh? What? Why is he waiting? He's my friend. He should be coming, right? You guys would be angry with me, would you not? Jesus' reputation had to be sacrificed so God could be glorified. He couldn't come immediately when they called him, because you have to bear in mind, it was a work for the sisters to find him. We're not talking they picked up their cell phone and was like, hey, Jesus, yeah, Lazarus, he's in pretty bad shape. You ought to get here, man. It wasn't even telegraph. It wasn't even it wasn't even that good. It wasn't even as good as the party lines you guys used to have. These sisters had to figure out where Jesus was and send the message through their contacts to get it to him. It was work. And when Jesus didn't come immediately, it seemed like that work was being overlooked. Again, sacrificing his reputation for the glory of God. Let me ask you something. How quickly will you sacrifice your reputation for the glory of God? I knew one pastor, and it took a while for his congregation to get their heads around this, but he went to the bar almost every Friday and Saturday night. He would go in, he'd get a stool, he'd get a Diet Coke, he'd sit there and he'd wait for folks to come in, and he'd knock glasses with, he'd have his Diet Coke, they'd have a rum and Coke. And he'd sit and talk to them. Get a feel for what their life was going through. Get a feel for if he could help them out. Get a feel for what was going on that he was missing in a community that was not his church, but was a community outside of his church. And the church there, they had a hairy fit. They had 2 or 3 people that kept coming in. Do you know who I saw in the bar on Saturday night? And people started going, what were you doing in the bar on Saturday night? Well, I saw the pastor in there. It's okay, I'm just a church member, but you can't have the pastor in there. That man brought more people to Jesus than most of the people I've ever met. Simple reason. He was willing to sacrifice his reputation to build something solid for Jesus Christ. Are you willing to sacrifice your reputation for that? I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? My question is this. Do you believe this enough to sacrifice for it? Do you believe it enough to sacrifice your reputation? Even more, do you believe it enough to sacrifice who you are? As we move down through John, we get down into John, and we get into like 38, through 11, around 38-ish. Oh, too far, sorry. 17. Martha comes out of the house. Jesus gets to Judea. Martha hears he's there. She comes out of the house. And what does Martha do? Let me tell you. She walks up to him in verse 21 and says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Martha is a woman built around obligation. You may remember earlier in the Gospels, Martha's the one that's scrambling around trying to make the house clean while Jesus is showing up. The master's coming, I've got to get the house clean. You remember that? And she sees her sister kind of sitting down there by Jesus' feet, and she comes to Jesus. She goes, Master, my sister's just lollygagging around your feet. Come on, make her help me out. I want to point out, this text doesn't talk anything about how clean Martha's house was. But it does mention that Mary anointed the Lord's feet and wiped it off with her hair. Are you with me? But obligation is who Martha was. She was going to get it done. It was how she reacted to the world. It was how she identified in the world. Jesus tells Martha something that is new, that is beyond anything she knows, but she is lost in her own trial of sacrifice and missed the significance of Jesus' words. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this? Martha looks at him and it goes, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. She says the words, but nothing about her actions match up. Because as soon as she says those words, what does she do? Does she worship the God she just talked about? Does she try to lead him to her brother for the life that he can give? No, she runs back to the house to tell her little sister that Jesus is here. She is obligated to make sure the family is doing what the family should do. Now, I want to tell you this. I'm preaching this and I'm talking to you, and some of you look like you're asleep. And I'm worried about that, okay? I'm concerned. Because I want you to hear this part really well. Are you willing to sacrifice obligation for the glory of God? The number of times I have come into a church and somebody is obviously hurting, it is breaking their heart that something is happening, that something is going on in their lives, and we say, how are you doing? And what do we say? I'm fine. Somebody is sick and dying, and we go and we want to pray with them and we want to outpour with them. And we go, what's going to happen? They look at you and go, if it's God's will, I'll make it through this. Do you think they want to say that? No. They want to look at you and go, pray that God will heal me. I have no problem with that. That's at least honest to our master. But we are obligated as good Christians to stand there and stoically take every lashing that comes our way, like a rock. I hope as I'm talking about this, you feel what I'm saying. I hope you know what I'm saying, and I hope if you have been that person, you allow that to sink in and you allow it to soften you. We are not obligated as Christians to accept every bad thing that comes down the pipe with a smile and a grin and a lucky kick of our heels. We are obligated as Christians to take that to Jesus Christ. We are obligated as Christians to lay it at his feet. Martha even says, Lord, if you'd have been here, you'd have saved him. He goes, your brother will live again. She goes, I know. Church says he's going to live again at the last days. Did you hear that part? Sounds almost like a funeral today, doesn't it? Sounds like a lot of the times I've been with other pastors in hospital rooms. Well, if he dies now, we know he's going to a better place. That's a nice platitude. Jesus wants to know you want to live. Jesus wants you to say, tell me what you need. Seek and you will find. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek my heart and know that it's for you. We are not supposed to be stoic rocks that take the lashings of the world every 5 minutes. We are supposed to be a community that is tied together and has our hearts and our minds focused on Jesus and his love. And I pray that will soften you and allow you to sacrifice your obligation so that you can honestly say you believe in those words. Now we need to be super careful here too. Because even though obligation is the right thing to say, sometimes it goes where we lose that a little too much. And this is going to sound odd, but we might have to sacrifice how we love some. If you look at John 11:29, when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at a place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. We sprint in faith to the feet of the provider, and we proclaim our faith, but often we are inconsolable and single-minded in our grief, pain, or loss. Faith has to grow beyond the soft and somewhat childish depth of the weeping child begging our Father to make it stop. I love that Mary loves. But in both interactions we have with Mary, her love makes her so single-minded on the one thing that she doesn't. Even here, she goes to him and goes, Master, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. I know, Mary. Master, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. He wouldn't have died. He wouldn't have died. I have seen so many times, particularly spouses, when a husband or wife dies, the other one is inconsolable and you can't do anything with them. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I understand that if my wife died, you would have a hard time getting me back here for a while. But my Jesus requires that I sacrifice some of that and I come back to him and glorify him. We cannot allow a love to grow in us that is perverted from what Christ's love is. Christ's love is focused on glorifying God. When we take the kind of love that I see here, what we are doing is we are focusing on our needs, on our wants, on our things, on what we are seeking for. Do you notice there's a lot of we and our in there? And not much a lot of God? I will example it by saying this. I have had many nights sitting in my kids' room where they were coughing, hacking. Asher has really bad allergies, and he gets so sick sometimes when his allergies kicks up that he starts throwing up. He coughs so much in his bed. And he whimpers, and he cries, and he gets fevers, and he doesn't want to be in there, and he wants somebody to hold him, and he wants something to do. And I go in, and I sit in his bed, and I hold him, and I cry with him, and I whimper with him, and I sniff with him, and I cry. And only thing in my mind is, dear Lord, please let my son be alive. Dear Lord, please take this sickness from my son. Dear Lord, don't let my son hurt like this anymore. Dear Lord. Now, here's my problem, okay? As much as I want to pray for my son, and that is okay for me to pray for my son, I become so focused on my son that I forget that it's God I'm praying to. Are you with me? I become so focused on the earthly things that I think are important that I forget it's God that I'm supposed to be talking to in His plan I'm supposed to be working through. I hope this is never true. But if God needs to take my son so that the kingdom can grow, He can have him. Because I need to be willing to sacrifice that earthly love for the greater kingdom of God, for His glorification. I want you to know what I just said will offend a lot of people. But the truth of the matter is, when we focus our love so heavily on something on earth that we can't give it up for God, it's become an idol. We like to say that if you watch TV too much, that's an idol. We like to say that if you love, a certain football team too much, that's an idol. There are certain football teams that it could be bad to love. I'm just going to tell you right now. But I'm not saying any teams. Just saying. There are things, I say I love McDonald's, and everybody in here laughs about it. But the truth of the matter is if I love McDonald's too much, it's going to kill me. We have a nutritionist in this church that's told me that. I have a doctor who's told me that. If I can't see past McDonald's and see into my whole nutritional plan, it'll kill me. If I can't fit my love of the things on earth into God's whole plan, it'll kill me. Sometimes we have to sacrifice our love of the things on earth for the greater glory of God. Faith grows. Faith grows through the sacrifice of our perspective. Obligation and a love of earthly things are both perspectives. I don't know. You may have a different perspective. You may have something different that totally takes you over. And if you do, I hope that you will get to a place where you can sacrifice that perspective so that you will know Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing me will never die. Do you believe this? There's one more person I kind of want to talk about. We don't hear about Lazarus much in this whole deal. I just want to point out, we know Lazarus, he gets sick, he dies, he comes back from death. That's what we normally hear about, right? But I have to tell you, as somebody who was sick, really, really sick, a long sickness, there were things that drove me crazy, that made me angry, that made me frustrated, that made me want to change things fast. When you are sick for a while, it's hard to handle. We know Lazarus was sick long enough that his sisters tracked Jesus down. Again, that wasn't a cell phone call. That took time for them to send a message and get an answer back. Okay? It was no small feat in the first century. He was the man of the house. And he was reduced to the sick one in the house who had to be taken care of. I'm going to posit it was very difficult for Lazarus to consider himself useful during sickness. Because sometimes when you get sick, you just don't feel like you can do anything, and it kind of stinks. It may even grow some bitterness or some resentment or some frustration or some anger, because I'm going to tell you something. When I had a tube shoved up my nose and I couldn't go further than my back door, it was really frustrating to me to watch my grass grow. I like my lawn. I like keeping my lawn cut, and I've got a tube in my nose attached to a machine over there that goes brrr the whole time, and I hated it because I'm standing at the back door looking at this beautiful green grass coming up, and I noticed that when my wife takes the dog out, it's about halfway up her leg, and the next day it seems like it's about 3/4 of the way up her leg. And I look at the grass, and I go, I can go cut it. I can go cut it. And my wife looked at me and went, go sit down. Because my wife is smart, and I am not. She said, go sit down. I can cut it, honey. She goes, I could knock you down right now without trying. And my daughter goes, Daddy, I'll go cut the lawn. I'm like, no, I can cut the lawn. For months, I was going to cut my lawn, and I felt useless because it was my job, and I couldn't do it because I had this tube up my nose, and I had this machine behind me. It drove me crazy, and it made me angry, and it made me angry not with the people in my house, although I'm sure I took it out on them some, but it made me angry at me for being useless, for not being able to do what was my job. And the worst part of that is I didn't want to ask for help. Hey, I'm going to tell you a secret in the church. Are you ready? We hate asking each other for help. I don't know why it is. We are supposed to be a community of people who have everything in common. And you know what happens when we decide we're going to do something? Somebody goes, do you want me to come help you with that? No, I got it, man. It only weighs 800 pounds. Don't worry, I got it. Hey, your lawn's kind of looking a little, I know you've been sick. Do you need some help with your lawn? No, I'm planning on getting out there in a couple weeks. Dude, by then it's going to be a jungle. No, I'll take care of it. Don't worry. Hey, you look a little thin. I haven't been able to go get groceries. Do you want me to go get groceries? No, I'll go in a couple weeks. We're crazy. We're supposed to help each other out. And what we do is we put each other off. Because we have to be the ones in charge. We have to be in control. We have to be able to do whatever is going on in our lives. I want you to know something. I think Jesus' interaction with Lazarus is amazing. Are you ready? Look at 11:43 and 44. Jesus says, Father, it's going to back up to 41. So they took away the stone, then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. 43, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off his grave clothes and let him go. Let him go do whatever he wants to do. Let him go greet his sisters. Let him go mow the lawn. Let him go trim the bushes. Let him go take care of the dumb cats. Sorry, that's a personal thing in there, not a biblical thing. Let him go. Take the stuff off him and let him go. Jesus' interaction with Lazarus is this. Jesus says, come out, and the man who was sick, who could barely do anything, who I'm sure in my mind felt useless, came out of that tomb, and Jesus said, you are healed wholeheartedly, no options left. You are healed. Go do it. Are you ready to sacrifice your usefulness and your uselessness to be able to say you believe this? That we are a community that is tied to one another through the blood of Jesus Christ, who are all going to live again if we believe in him. Are you ready to sacrifice, dare I say it, your pride, to call on somebody for help? Are you willing to sacrifice your time and come here and work at the church and do stuff? We have stuff to do. There's a mower sitting in that shed down there that will mow down all that grass over there. I've ridden it a couple times. I'm ready for somebody else to ride it a couple times. Are you ready to sacrifice your time, your pride, your usefulness, your uselessness? Are you ready to sacrifice who you are? Are you ready to sacrifice your reputation so that you can say, do you believe this? Yes, I do. Because we are so busy holding on to ourselves, who we are and how we do things. We are so busy being hurt by stupid little things all the time. We are so busy being the people that we're not supposed to be, who are the opposite of the ones we are supposed to be, because we don't want to be Jesus's, because that would mean we aren't ours. We are so busy holding on to all of it that we can't sacrifice a single thing that makes it possible for us to say, I believe. This is hard for me. Because I do a lot of stuff. I like doing stuff. And sometimes I need to say I can't do stuff. And particularly after having COVID, there's not a whole lot I like to say that I can't do anymore. Because it was long enough there that I couldn't do it. So today, I'm asking you, as a sacrifice for me, will you help? As a sacrifice for me, I'm asking you to step out and sacrifice whatever it is that's holding you back from being Jesus' wholeheartedly 100%. I know you've been baptized. I know you've been saved. I know all those things, but what I'm asking you today is this. Let go of whoever you think you are and let Jesus make you the person he knows you should be. So the first time somebody walks up to you and says, do you believe this? You can say without an ounce of regret or without an ounce of hesitation, yes, I do. That is our invitation today. My invitation to you today is going to be very simple. I would like for you to pray that God would show you whatever is exactly in your way that needs to be sacrificed. I want to warn you of something though, okay? Those boards that I put down there, they're rough when I get done. Being the sacrificial board is not easy. That means you're going to get cut. It means you're going to get pounded on. It means you're going to be hammered. If something needs to get whooped on, it's going to be the sacrificial board. If I got to try and make something flat again, I'm not going to take it over to the nice new boards and hit on it. I'm going to take it to the sacrificial board and I'm going to whoop on it over there. I like whooped on today. I don't know. That's what I'm going to say. The sacrificial board is not something that you look at and go, oh, that has obviously been a board that's been worked really well and is very well kept and everything else. It's the one that may have a mark or two on it. But you know what? It is useful. It is solid. And it does its job. Because it is sacrificial. Sacrifice is not easy, folks, but it is necessary. So today what I'm praying for you is this, and I hope you're going to pray for yourself, is God will show you what needs to be sacrificed. And you'll be willing to do it. Step up. Take the leap. And be his person that can always say, yes, I believe.